Hi, folks. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the iWrite Radio Videocast stroke podcast. I've got Stuart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton with me today, and I'm Norrie Stewart. I think we'll maybe lead with the President of the United States being unpresidential. I take it we all watched his meltdown in front of the world's press. Jimmy, what did you think?
Well, I was sitting, having just watched a couple of episodes of Wolf Hall on BBC Four, and the brilliant Mark Rylance portraying Thomas Cromwell. It was interesting to watch a fictional politician, but a historical one, and then switch over and see Donald Trump making an absolute horse's bahookie of himself. It was hilarious to watch. His lack of knowledge of his own position and the powers of that position are startling. And he just, seriously, somebody for his backroom team should have came out last night, grabbed him by the wig and hauled him off that stage, because he made an absolute donut of himself, but it was a joy to watch.
Sure.
I watched I'm watching being quizzed by a very senior BBC international correspondent. Anybody remember his name?
Can't. No.
It was Gavin Esler, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? Oh, of course. He's in the States now, isn't he?
I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter who it was. And he was at the back row. They're all spread out as they, not very spread out as they do in America. Mm-hmm. They're still passing virus between them all in that wee room. He was at the back row, and he would not give up. I saw him ask at least 4 questions in a row, maybe 5. And was it him that rattled the president?
I think
there was a lassie for NBC that he absolutely lost the plot with at one point, early doors in the whole thing.
She was in the front
quite
row.
Embarrassing. He was pointing down at her and talking down to her in a really nasty way. Put it this way: if she was in your company in a bar and a bloke spoke to her like that, you take him out the door and give him a hard slap.
Well, it was stunningly incompetent. I mean, it's almost as if the coronavirus isn't what it's about. It's all about him getting re-elected.
Of course it is all about him getting re-elected. It's all about, as far as he's concerned, it's all about the stock exchange and the unemployment figures.
And how in some way lie about those, because the figures are horrific and they ain't getting better before November.
And that I think, if he gets back in, God help us, because
you've got to remember, if this crisis continues into the autumn, they may find an excuse to delay the election, and he'll be allowed to stay in power for another year.
They can't, mate. There's absolutely no get-outs in the American Constitution about postponing elections. Didn't happen during wars, so the candidate for a viral pandemic that the sitting president is busily saying barely exists, and they will be out of it in a couple of weeks.
I did notice somebody on Twitter saying that the meltdown was due to the fact that he hadn't managed to get down to Key Largo for his couple of rounds of golf, and it was now a mental health issue for him.
I wouldn't be surprised, mate. Seriously, there's a lot of people have postulated that Donald has some serious mental health problems that have been hidden from the American public. And I'm amazed that he's allowed to be that exposed by his team. It's almost as if they don't want him to get elected in November.
He is on regular medication, and I think it's mostly for mental health issues, anxiety or something. Well, I've heard it's Ritalin.
Mate,
he acts like a kid right enough.
To be honest, did you see his appointment to the committee that he's set up to reopen the US economy and open up America again? The first 2 appointments were his daughter and her husband, for crying out loud.
He's obviously some sort of control freak. Criticism is something he just cannot take on any level. How many people has he fired?
Oh, lost count, mate.
You know, there
As I
must
say,
be about 3 governments worth of fired employees.
I've seen a couple of interviews of people that have worked with him who said that he is ridiculously self. It's going out my head. Self-conscious. He compares himself to people, and he compares himself unfavourably to people, hates them, and has to get rid of them because of it.
Well, if it's about competence, there can't be many people who are less incompetent than him.
That's very true.
I can think of one.
And
Boris
who's
Johnson.
No, but at least Boris has got the self-awareness to realise that he's shite at his job and run away and hide, mate.
That's true. I give you that.
he's left Rab out there to dry. Talking about which, finally, after, well, we'll be kind and say 36 hours, but I think it's about 48 hours. The mainstream media have finally latched on to this, at the moment, possibly rumour, although it was reported in the Times today, that certain private companies in England who produce PPE have been told to prioritise NHS England over the other 3, because I believe it applies to Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland as well. That was finally brought up at the First Minister's presser today. Any thoughts on that? Stuart, we'll let you have first pop at this.
I think we'll go harder than you suggest, prioritising. Diverting was the expression that's been used by the First Minister, by Jean Freeman, the Health Secretary. The First Minister was surprisingly tough on the issue. She's been under fire from, we could say, typical commentators, but she's under been under fire right from the beginning for not being tough enough and not standing up for Scotland's position ever since this crisis began. But I think what's happened today, there are a number of things happened today that are that clarified things. Jason Leach, a very good communicator. If you don't know who he is, look him up. I'm not explaining who he is. Apparently this morning on Scotland GMS or something, BBC Scotland Radio anyway, he denied that there was any problem at all with the diversion of PPE to England only by companies based in England, fair enough. However, the First Minister was pretty quick to smack him down. She said she hadn't heard him, and then Jean Freeman was even tougher. And she said that she was supposed to have inconveniently, as far as Matt Hancock was concerned, a phone call today, which was pre-arranged. Not necessarily just on this issue, but it was pre-arranged phone call, and suddenly that phone call vanished. So we could be talking about finally an issue that might break. Nicola Sturgeon's just been accused of following the UK line too closely, shall we say?
Well, the two issues that are in the paper at the moment are the one where the business grants are being given to single businesses, not single premises within the business. That's the Tory high horse.
Yeah, but a bit
At the
detailed
moment.
go down there, isn't it? I mean,
well, yeah, but it means more businesses will get money than down south. Not businesses will get more money. They'll in fact get less money up here. But I think what came out, a couple of things seem to be clarified, partially clarified, about the PPE situation. It appears that our national procurement is not affected by these 4 companies. It appears that, because the original story came from somebody to do with the care home, the private care home sector, it appears that they've been told that English care homes are getting priority over Scottish care homes. So that's kind of like private procurement, not national procurement, which would explain why this wasn't at the fingertips of the Scottish government to answer the questions.
I mean, that's been the traditional supply route that private care homes and possibly even council ones, I don't know, that they seem to be, never mentioned, but certainly not. They normally get their own supply of PPE, and I would assume they normally don't need anything like the quantity they now need.
You see, I have a kind of problem about this with care homes. I mean, my personal experience through my parents of care homes is that at least 2-3 times a year, especially in the winter, you know, you get coronavirus infections, you get flu infections, and they shut down the care home, and they must have that protective equipment. I would imagine they would have more of it in stock than any other business. And they're all moaning and shouting about it. You know, I would have thought that their supply lines for that kind of thing would have been hard and fast.
Oh, come on, Nori, I think you're making it too simple. This is an infection like no other. It's far more infection than ordinary flu.
Yeah, but they wear this stuff all the time.
Yeah, but are you
every time they toilet somebody, every time they take somebody to the shower, they wear gloves when they serve food. They wear these plastic aprons all the time.
Yeah, but it's not about the apron. The aprons don't cover their arms, and they need the face covered. I mean, come on, it's a much more serious issue.
Well,
they actually don't half the time in the care sector.
Well,
the reality is they're having to pay more money for it. Certainly the private care homes are having to pay more money for it because the prices is getting gouged.
I did notice,
and that's where they're whining. They then turn into the Scottish government and say, "Well, can you supply us?" The Scottish government say, "Well, we've got enough for the NHS, and we've got enough for a couple of days for you." The problem comes where their supply gets cut off completely, and what the Scottish government thought was a week and a half supply that they're sitting on at the moment suddenly turns into a 2 or 3 day supply because all the private care homes all of a sudden need it.
Anyway, can we not just lift the culpable person, the culpable body, right up to where it should be, which is the UK government and their ideology that herd immunity was where it was going to be, and we don't want to do anything too soon.
I don't think we can. To be blunt, I don't think we can blame the UK government for this. This looks like a problem for NHS England.
I don't think for a second that any company is putting on their website that they won't supply people in Scotland without an okay from somebody pretty high up in NHS England, who's probably had to go all the way to cabinet level to get the okay to say that.
Well, you do know that the man in charge of NHS England, Sir Simon Stevens, spent 10 years working in the American health system, and all his life has proposed that the NHS should be privatised.
And you do it by what? By diverting PPE from other health services into the English health service.
I don't think
that sounds like a good capitalist move to me.
No, you're drilling down too far into the detail, Norrie.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll keep it very superficial then, Stuart.
Let's try and lay a bit of blame. Matt Hancock is about as much use as a fart in a spacesuit. He's decided not to take the call for Jean Freeman today, probably because Jean Freeman's ripped him a new ass the last couple of times she's been on Zoom to him. So he's avoiding her. If there was nothing going on here, he would take the call. I would suggest that Jason Leach was actually just reiterating the Scottish government's position this morning, because it was a back of 8 he was on the radio. But by the back of 11, that had changed when the Scottish government found out there actually was an issue. Okay. And that this issue could impact upon their own supply.
I've got a problem with Jason Leach. Right. As I said before, he's a brilliant communicator, and they love him down south. They've forever got him on the London news. But he's never strayed a minute, not for a second, away from the official line, which is it's a UK 4 nations approach.
Right. Okay. There's a podcast. There's a podcast called The Political Party that's got an hour-long interview with Jason Leach from yesterday, I think. It was published today. Listen to that, Stuart.
So what's he saying?
Well, he was asked the question about, will Scotland do it any differently? And he turned around and said, well, look, we've got Orkney and Shetland and we've got Sauchiehall Street, and there's Oxford Street in London. There'll be places who possibly should do it differently. And if it suits Scotland to do it differently, Scotland will do it differently,
Well,
which is the official Scottish government line.
Well, there you go. Okay.
And that's his job, is to, he's very good on messaging, how they get the message out, why they do it in the way they do it, what the message is, how it has to be tweaked to appeal to different demographics. It's well worth a listen. It's called The Political Party with, is it Jason Ford? I think the guy who runs it. But it's a first class listen. Where are we? Jason Leach. Oh no, that was Matt Ford is the guy that does it.
Is that a double F-O-R-D-E, Ford?
No, F-O-R-D-E. But you'll get it on Spotify. But it's a good listen. I listened to it this morning. And not only is Jason Leach very human about his explanations, but he does that explanation of why testing has become iconic and it shouldn't be as well, which is the idea that, okay, you test me on Monday, you get the results back on Tuesday. The result tells you I wasn't infectious on Monday, but you've no idea if I'm infectious on Tuesday.
Oh no, no, that's ignoring the possibility of a test for antibodies, which of course we don't yet have.
Exactly.
Well, I'd ignore it because people have been searching for it since January and come up with absolutely zip so far. So I'd ignore the possibility of that and work with tests that actually do give an indication.
Even the fact that antibody test is brought up shows how stupid half the questions are that are asked about this, because it doesn't exist. You know, let's talk about an antibody test. Why? Why would we talk about it? We don't have one.
Let's talk about Japan. Let's talk about Japan locking down Hokkaido again yesterday, which would tend to suggest that there very well may be a second wave. Let's talk about Wuhan having 161 new cases yesterday, which is the highest figure that they've had in weeks.
Well, he covers.
This isn't going to go away anytime soon, so we need to forget the idea that there's going. The reality is, we'll probably have to lock the elderly up, the really at-risk people. They're probably going to have to be locked up for months. Well,
he covers all of that, the different democrats of different countries, why we can't be certain yet, why some things have worked in some countries and not in others. It's a really good interview. And he's honest.
I'm tempted to move to Greenland or somewhere like that. Kind of one of these places that are getting no cases.
Wouldn't they let you in?
Well,
that's why.
Probably. You're right, Stuart.
Anyway, the Faroes are closer.
So
but they've got some strange eating habits that I couldn't be putting up with, mate.
Have the Faroes not got a couple of cases now? I think they have.
I don't know.
No, you see that thing you were talking about earlier about businesses? That kind of irks me somewhat when you get people for particularly Tory party sympathisers like the business organisations and that. But I'd just like to ask them who they want to lose out, who they want to go to business so that they can get an extra few grand out of the Scottish Government, and why they think the Scottish Government should automatically follow the exact same path that a Tory Chancellor decided suited England. It's a ridiculous argument that they've got. We have a government up here. The fact that 2.2 billion got handed to that government doesn't mean that they should spend it in a way that the Tories in London think they should. And it certainly doesn't mean that the CBI get to pick how it's spent.
Jackson Carlow, when he first brought this up, talked about a hotelier. And I don't know if you remember the instance with the hotelier up north who was a Tory party donor. I think he'd actually been a candidate. He's got half a dozen hotels. And I'm almost prepared to bet money that this is the guy he's talking about.
Is this a guy called Kilgour?
No, that's Kilgour's the guy that owns the care homes.
Oh, right.
You're probably right, mate.
This is another guy from the past. It won't be the wee coffee shop. It won't be, although I think one person he did mention had 15 coffee shops. and they should get nothing if they paid their staff off. Simple as that.
Yeah, or fair enough. We could argue about coffee shops and bars if you want. I mean, the number of people have got 10 bars.
Well, there's also the people that stay in the Highlands, mate. You're looking at about 30% of the working population in the Highlands work seasonally.
Yeah,
and a lot of them are missing out because their seasonal contract didn't start till this weekend. And most places open up for the season on Easter weekend.
So
they're getting zero support at the moment.
And will these hotels be taking them on? Of course not.
No, and even if even if they get half a season, their whole budget for the entire year is predicated on getting the season. So if they get half of it, most of these places will make no profit this year.
No, but one of the key issues why the money distribution of these support for the businesses is different. You've got large parts of the Highlands, for example, in islands where the only businesses are tourist businesses. And the impact on the local community is going to be devastating.
Aye, and the wee shops will depend on it. I mean, I would imagine it'll be a more than 50% of their business will be tourists.
Did you see the figure Did you see the figure this morning for the? Oh God, who was it? It might have been it wouldn't be the Office of Budget Responsibility. Somebody came out with a figure this morning for the hit on the economy for this quarter, 35%.
That is
that's huge. It's massive.
The last big hit I heard was 25. That was a couple of days ago.
Yeah, but the big point is that it's not just this country; it's the whole world, and so that there isn't going to be a part of the world that can pick up the rest of us.
No.
Which is one of the reasons I think China pushed to go out of lockdown so quickly. I think they were hoping to be, 3 rungs ahead of everybody else on the ladder.
Absolutely. I think that's what Putin was hoping for as well when initially they didn't report or they didn't seem to get a lot of cases in Russia, but now it's growing exponentially like it's growing elsewhere.
Well, so there were
Russia's locked down now,
queues of of ambulances outside hospitals in Moscow. That was another point that Jason Leach made, was that we still do not know for certain that having had coronavirus guarantees immunity.
Absolutely. There's no evidence at the moment to prove or disprove that. And to be honest, mate, I've said it before, as much as people talk about whether or not testing works, Germany is the place that's going to actually give us the data that we need. Because for one, you can trust their data because they're quite an open and honest culture there. And two, they have masses and masses of it because of the amount of testing that they're doing.
Deaths in Germany apparently are rising.
Aye, after a very, very slow start, they seem to be getting a bit of a hard hit at the moment.
I'll publish a link to the Jason Leach interview on today's, because it is well worth listening to.
Well, it's just a bit convenient that it's only just come out, because up to now I've not trusted him. But I mean, if we've got a different story, fair enough. But it's just a bit convenient.
There's nothing I heard today that I haven't heard him say before. I mean, I do tend, if I see a link to something he's saying, I do tend to go and look at it. But this is it all rolled into one interview.
All right, fair enough. Can I just reference why it's been brought up? It is that this idea that's been going around for quite a while, that Nicola Sturgeon's government has been tracking too close to the UK government's plan.
Yeah, but that idea is going about for people who have a problem with Nicola Sturgeon and our government. I think they've followed the London tack a bit too close. But I understand the reasons for doing it is that London can very easily turn off the money tree.
That would really be my point. I think we've been fortunate that we were possibly 10 days, 2 weeks behind what was happening in London. But until the British government came out with some sort of policy for supporting businesses and people's wages, what could she have done? She didn't have the money to lock down until the British government said, here's the package. You know, I mean, the idea she could have locked down a month before the British government when there was no money in the pot is ludicrous. Who could have afforded to obey it? Everybody seems to forget that, you know, Westminster have got the purse strings.
Yeah, it is a thing that we should go back to and encourage people to look at again and again. Because I personally, I know that I've got skin in the game, that I support the SNP, but I personally think the Scottish government have dealt with this a lot better. I think they pushed the UK government into certain of their actions. I think they still are pushing the UK government into some of their actions. The amount of copying that comes from London, what is it they say, flattery being the sincerest form of whatever, I can't remember.
Northern Ireland seem to be doing pretty well.
Aye, which is frightening given the lack of talent that they have at the top. They must have a damn fine civil service.
Well, I mean,
but apart from the Cheltenham Festival, the Irish situation is quite a bit behind the UK situation.
Well, that and the fact that the South locked down early and completely.
They went about a week and a half before the UK, didn't they?
Yeah. So it would be interesting to see what the infection rate around the border between the North and South is. I
mean, we've got to come up with a caveat because everybody says the same thing. The data at the moment is incomplete everywhere you look. And until there's a lot more being gathered and people can look back, we can argue as much as we like by comparing countries in different jurisdictions, but we won't really know for quite a while.
Yeah, well, I think it's a point that's made every day at the presser by Nicola Sturgeon when she gets asked questions about when are we going to lift the lockdown. It's when we get enough data to justify that move. And I sometimes really wish that the journalists were in the room so that Jean Freeman could put her laser gaze on them and burn their heads off their shoulders.
Well, some of them are remarkably embarrassing. I mean, seriously, the amount of questions that she got asked today that she'd already answered, and does that show you the stupidity of the people in the press pack? They're not paying attention enough to realise that what they're about to ask was answered 10 minutes ago, or do they just ask it again in case you say something different?
And the denial of reality, that question from the Daily Record, is this new money? This isn't new money. Oh, did they have the money before this? Or they were told before this they were getting a 3.3% rise. Well, no agreement was signed, so how were they told they were getting a 3.3% rise?
I think that's a blunt fight to stay out of, to be honest.
But well, it's this Labour union shite.
Oh, she broke a record today. She had 21 questions she took.
Yeah. And it was what, an hour and 10 minutes, I think, 10, 15 minutes.
It was quite an extensive one.
I mean, I've got to say she's still very, very impressive.
By a long way. She's streets ahead of anybody else in the UK. Mind you, we're not watching what's happening at the presses in Ireland and Wales, are we?
Yeah, that's true.
I'll watch RTE tonight then. See what Dublin's doing.
I don't know who's doing the presser this afternoon, but whoever gets the short straw.
Do you think?
I wonder if any of the UK people will ask the question about what we've been.
As a betting man, Jimmy, I was about to ask you, what are the odds on the question about English health service getting English manufactured PPE ahead of Scotland?
When he get asked me, even if it's that wee Scottish boy for Sky News, James Edwards or whatever his name is, he'll not ask a question like that. He is the only reason he moved from BBC Scotland to Sky News is because he clearly has a nice big fat round sphincter that Rupert can get his hands right up and work him.
No, James. Well, it was in the Times today. The Times will ask a question about.
No, but the Times one was specifically trying to muddy the waters, mate. That's what was going on last night. The Times were trying to muddy the waters, and the Telegraph were trying to do something similar.
Are we back on the PPE being diverted?
Yeah, unfortunately for them, people had got a hold of screen grabs from that company. There's only one company that's managed to be stupid enough to put it on their website, but people had got screen grabs from it. So regardless of what they had to say to try and spin it, the spin operation didn't work.
Oh, right. I saw that. That's the one in Melksham. I used to live there.
Very nice.
It's an interesting hook, though. I mean, you can phrase the question quite nicely, you know. Is the PPE situation in English care homes so desperate that we have to steal PPE from Scotland in order to meet its needs?
It doesn't fit a UK journalist.
Can you imagine if somebody tried to ask that, automatically there'll be about a 2-minute delay on every question that's going to whoever's doing these press conferences in London.
Well,
automatically, if somebody was asking a question like that, their Wi-Fi would be knocked out.
I'd like to know the odds of Priti Patel being back on again.
I very much had doubt it after her performance the other day.
No chance, eh?
0 teen.
0 teen sounds a bit right, aye.
0 teen.
John Grace, is it Grace or Grace? A Guardian columnist. He was kind of, I think it was tongue-in-cheek. He was bumming up Rab in a little bit. He claims that Rab is actually quite well educated, but he did describe him looking a bit like a frightened rabbit to start with, and that he's growing into the role. But the first time he took over from Johnson, he was looking, I want this to finish. I want to run away.
I do think he's looking more comfortable, but I don't think he's any advert for the public school system.
No, come on, we've said this before, guys. There's very little talent on that front bench. Boris got rid of. For Boris to get to the top, he had to get rid of half of the front bench, and that's where the talent usually sits. I mean, he's done that. The people that are sitting there now, they're malleable, so Dominic Cummings can bully them and cajole them into doing whatever Dominic Cummings wants.
Where's he disappeared to? The last time we saw him, he was running out of number 10.
But he doesn't want to be the story, mate. He doesn't want people knowing that he's pulling all the levers behind the scenes.
But is he at home dying of the virus?
I think
mate. He did say that he was self-isolating because he was showing signs, and that's the last we found out.
Yeah, well, it's a good excuse to go disappear off the...
Go dark makes it... Aye, exactly. I mean, come on, most of these people are a bit as useful as a grease spot on a fresh iron shirt. They're bloody idiots, and nobody wants to work with them.
Jimmy,
Dominic Cummings, because they'll do what he tells them to do.
Jimmy, you're becoming famous for things like that. But I don't think anybody that watches this show knows you've got more alternative words for swearing. What are they called? Cockney rhyming slang?
Euphemism.
Euphemisms.
Aye. You insist for swearing. You're a star.
If I start swearing, mate, there's every chance I'll do 30 or 40 minutes, and Norrie will have to cut me off.
Right, lads, we've covered Trump, we've covered the PPE. Anybody spot anything else in the Twitter sphere, blogosphere, Facebookosphere?
I'm waiting for tomorrow's figures from, what are they called in Scotland? National Register of Scotland.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Tomorrow, and things could be quite different. I must admit, today, apart from that topic about the PPE being diverted to NHS England, I couldn't see anything we were going to talk about till today.
Yeah, well, there's figures starting to appear for care homes in England and deaths in community in England, and the figures are horrific. I'm assuming that somebody down there is actually putting huge figures out into the Twitter sphere and what have you, so that when the real figures come out, because they're going to have to report them at some point, that it doesn't look quite as bad. But the figures are horrendous down there.
Well, the 13% that was quoted yesterday seemed really low. If Scotland's running, and we're talking infections, not deaths here.
Yeah, 30% we were, weren't we?
Well, 37%. You're right, Jimmy.
I said yesterday, aye.
But I mean, that's two-thirds less. And most of Europe's running at over 40%.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke about the figures last week, Norrie, and I was kind of surprised that there had been, I think it was 134 deaths in the community when we were running at about 220 deaths in hospital and what have you. So I was surprised it was that low. So I'm kind of expecting that the NRS figure might be rather high this week.
As I say, I mean, my own experience, these guys know how to protect themselves and isolate people with infections because they're doing it 3 or 4 times a year. So they have good systems in place. But obviously they have the most vulnerable element of the community to look after. Difficult.
Well, just to switch the subject just ever so slightly, if you think the machinations between London and Scotland are bad about PPE, watch a press conference or I don't think they'll have a press conference actually, they'll probably just release a statement. But do have a look at what's going on in Scottish football and how they're trying to sort the system so that Celtic get another title.
Oh, can we not go there, please?
It's going to be a belter, mate. There's going to be all kinds of machinations kicking off there. They all think they're Machiavelli. They couldn't spell it. Never mind be it.
Please, let's not go there.
Are they expecting to be able to actually finish the season?
Oh no, Murray, come on, please, guys.
Because you're not interested, Stuart, doesn't it mean nobody else is?
It's incredibly complicated. I mean, we could talk for another 3 hours about it.
Well, can just answer the question for me because I've not been following it.
No, they've not got a clue. What they're looking to do is call it now. But Peter Lawwell, who is a member of the UEFA board, has been given information from UEFA that UEFA will make a decision, I think next week or late this week, on whether, for example, the Scottish League are allowed to call it. So he's trying to push for it to be called now so that Celtic get the title now, just in case UEFA change their mind and say you can't call it. UEFA look to be about to instruct all countries to declare this season null and void, and Celtic desperately don't want that.
So how does that affect money going to clubs and stuff?
I think what would happen money-wise is that, depending on the contract, but it looks like the sponsors are willing to hand out the prize money based on the positions at the moment. It's mainly about titles and European positions and relegation.
Right.
I mean, a club like Hearts, I mean, can you really relegate Hearts with 9 games to go? They've been awful this season, mate, and they'd probably deserve to go down. But can you say to a club who have invested millions in a new stand and sorting out their stadium, you're going down to the first division?
Yeah, mate, you can't make a decision about a whole league, the whole of Scottish football on one club.
Well, at the moment, that's exactly what's happening. Dundee hold the cast and vote. So if Celtic get to Dundee and offer them enough money, will Dundee vote Celtic's way? Or if Rangers get to Dundee, will they vote Rangers' way? That's exactly where we're heading at the moment.
So what?
Who offers Dundee the biggest bung?
Effectively, if they say, right, the season's null and void, the argument will then be, everybody stays the same for next season. Nobody's promoted, relegated.
We start next season where we started this season.
Right, but the history books will show whoever's at the top of the league today won the league.
Was at the top of the league, but it was declared null and void. Yeah,
but that's kind of the point I'm making. Those that suits will say, "Oh, it was null and void," and those that don't, who are taking Celtics at the top of the league.
Scotland has that history as well, mate, where Hearts lost 7 players midway through a season that they looked to be going on to win the league in 1914 because they joined up to go and fight. Right. And Celtic, no players joined up for Celtic. They continued operating as a professional club and won the league by a couple of points. So it's been seen in the past in Scotland to have been slightly unfair. So you wonder how it's... I don't know how it'll work out, mate. I just find it interesting that all these wee gimps that run football clubs in Scotland are trying to be politics.
A historical point, Jimmy. I thought every single first team player in the Hearts team joined up?
No, there were 12 players that joined up, mate, but they weren't all first team players. There were a couple of youth team players, there were a couple of second team players. There was a coach.
Okay, and on that note, and piece of clarity, and with apologies to Stuart.
Not to me. I think you need to apologise to the listeners. An awful lot of listeners outside Scotland won't know what you've been talking about for the last 5 minutes.
Well, you look like you're about to self-immolate rather than isolate.
Well, I know exactly every word that Jimmy said, but I don't think our listeners are interested. I'd like to make a dedication because there's a good friend of all of ours who's gone and died. And I'd like just to say a word of appreciation because we know him as Lord David Hamilton.
The Right Honourable David Hamilton.
And his father was the Duke of Hamilton, Scotland's senior
brother.
Okay, brother. His brother was. Well, his father was before his brother became the Duke of Hamilton. And I don't have a lot of time for the aristocracy, but David himself was a lovely man, and I'm very sad to see him that he died. I don't know what he died from, but right now I'm just want to say that publicly.
Yep, cool. We all like David.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks for that, folks. Stuart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton. I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening and watching, folks. And we'll no doubt catch up with you tomorrow with news about Matt Hancock's apology to the Scottish Health Service.
Yeah, right. Aye.
Being the priority. Cheers for now, folks.
Bye-bye.